What's new with Indian startups? CaratLane is a player in India's online jewelry market. It is on the brink of reshuffling the financial deck of its workforce. How come? Titan is a company that manufactures fashion accessories and is under the Tata Group. Titan also wants to buy out the ESOP pool of about 1.7% and acquire complete ownership of CaratLane. This would allow more than 70 out of CaratLane's employees to receive substantial ESOP payout ranging between 340 crore rupees and 380 crore rupees. CaratLane has between 1500 to 1700 employees. But what's an ESOP? Employee Stock Ownership Plans. What does that mean? Startup seems to be providing crazy opportunities at an unprecedented pace, especially in this post-pandemic world. India has been subject to a massive wave of digitalization born out of the COVID-19 pandemic. As someone joining a startup, is there a sense of ownership you would be getting here? Something to jolt a little addition motivation. Instead of a competitive salary and perks that one would find in a big corporate job, what can be done? Herein lie ESOPs, Employee Stock Ownership Plans, which gives employees who have joined newly formed companies stock of the company that can be cashed out at a set price after a set amount of time. The price of ESOPs, how many shares are to be offered, and which employees are to be given ESOPs are all decided by the founders or heads of the startup. Following this, there is grant date that granted to the selected beneficiaries. Once offered for a length of time, the ESOPs are held in a trust fund. That length of time is called a vesting period, and the date on which the vesting period comes to an end is called vesting date. If a startup employee wants to avail ownership of that stock, they would need to remain with the startup for that vesting period. And when it's over, they could buy company shares at allotted price, which would be lower than the market value, so it's at a discounted rate. Stocks that have vested give employees the right to purchase shares in a period of time, but it is not an obligation. This period is called the exercise period. Those shares can also be sold, giving them mad gains. Though some unlisted companies state that stocks cannot be sold to outsiders without authorization from the promoter, when there is a liquidity event like an IPO or cash acquisition, the ESOPs could be monetized. And if a startup employee leaves the company before the vesting period, the startup would buy back the ESOPs at fair market value. In 2021, Freshworks got listed on the Nasdaq. More than 500 of its employees in India became Crorepatis. Close to 80% of its employees owned shares at the time. So ESOPs gave them a sense of ownership and allowed them to own a portion of Freshworks' share capital. It also meant that a part of the company's profits were paid to shareholders in the form of dividends. So there is additional dividend income to be earned. For startups, ESOPs could also serve cash and reduce upfront costs. This way, hefty salaries won't have to be doled out when there is no profitability yet. And the best talent could also be retained. But they do affect stock pools of startups when it comes to future fundraising. ESOPs make employees have a vested interest in startups' growth trajectory. So, they would want to work towards building the startup, not just hitting arbitrary targets. And since many startups are achieving sizable valuations, the cash payouts could be lucrative. If someone is independent contractor for a startup, they are not barred from getting ESOPs even if they are not a permanent employee. A trend seen is reacquiring ESOPs given to employees through buybacks. If a company grants 20 shares for a 5-year vesting period, that's 4 shares they had received for every year of employment. But they could also face dilution. Titan may be keen to cement its relationship with CaratLane. It stands ready to absorb these shares from CaratLane employees. This move could be a strategic step towards Titan's overarching goal of attaining full ownership of CaratLane. This acquisition journey, subject to regulatory nods, is projected to culminate by October 2023. Other companies like Flipkart, Zerodha, Zomato, Paytm, and more have doled out ESOPs. According to one data point, ESOP cash outs have led to close to about $1.5 billion of wealth in the hands of startup employees since 2021. What is the future of ESOPs in India?